Okay, we've already removed the two bottom screws. Now we're removing the screen. While removing the screen, be careful not to break the plastic bezel frame around the glass. Okay, there are several clips along the edges to just try and lift up on each of the clips. Okay, we got, if you're looking at it, we got a clip right there. We got a clip here, here, over here, and here. So, and these parts just pop out from those clips. First step, you need to remove these three screws, and then you can disconnect the three flex cables that hold the front screen on. I'm turning the tape that I use to hold the screws in place to try and match where they come out of the iPhone. So we have the two bottom screws, and then these three are for the LCD shield or cable hold down, whatever you want to call it. Next, removing these three screws that hold the battery and the dock connector ports, a couple of antenna cables. Be careful with the antenna cables. I've had one break off of the cable and the connector. Okay, we're removing the battery. The battery cable came unplugged from the board before we started to remove it. Using the plastic pry tool as not to damage the aluminum housing. Make sure you disconnect the battery before you remove it, as you may tear the cable if not. And when you're lifting the cable up, be very careful. A lot of people have pulled the battery connector off the logic board. Now, these are flathead screws, and they're a little bit smaller than in the iPhone 4 4S. My screwdriver needed to be magnetized a little more. Fast forward a little. Okay, after we remove the three double screws out of the motherboard, we then remove the two antenna cable plugs. I'll pause it. Okay, the two antenna cable plugs. That cable is for the vibrate switch, volume up and down, and lock button. These two cables are for the antenna, and there's a screw right under it there. Okay, we also removed one other motherboard screw. Oh no, sorry, this screw went here. Now this screw, for some reason, does not allow a magnetic screwdriver to hold it, so grab some tweezers, be careful you don't drop it and lose it. And I put it on the tape right next to the screw that went into it. under the shield. Next, this one holds down the LED light for the flash. You got 2 screws here, and then this shielding, and then there's another double screw under the top one, and a smaller screw down here, and a plate that goes over it. So when you're going to put it back together, you want to remember that this little plate, and then the 2 screws, and then the bigger plate and the 2 screws.
Ask Maggie to help you find one next time.
Okay, that was the plate I was talking about. So that when you're reassembling, that goes in first, and then the 2 screws go into it. I think this is just part of the antenna assembly, but you got 2 screws that hold a flex cable that's attached to the motherboard. So before you remove the motherboard, you must remove those 2 screws. Unplugging the charge port dock connector, microphone, headset, everything assembly. Okay, we have an antenna cable down here, and then there's one also on the bottom of the top of the motherboard. So when you lift the motherboard up, you want to be careful not to move it too much until you disconnect the antenna cable up at the top, up here. Okay, the camera can stay on, and your logic board is out after this antenna at the bottom also. Now for the bottom flex cable, everything assembly basically, you'll have several screws. Let's count them out. If we can get in the camera. Oh. Sorry, I accidentally rewound it. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 screws in the bottom assembly. I just take them out and put them in the same place that they were in the phone on the tape, so you know where they go back in. Underneath this there are 4 tiny washers that you'll need to keep and put into the new back. As you're taking this assembly out, go slowly, be careful. A lot of adhesive holding it in place, but you can take it all out as one piece. Comes out as 2. It's not horrible, but you'll have to remove the adhesive from the microphone connector to get it to come out in 2 pieces. Otherwise, just take it out in 1 piece, slowly, carefully. Here you're lifting a little rubber gasket that goes over the microphone and directs it to the hole in the bottom of the screen, or the bottom of the frame. Go slowly with that adhesive. You can even use some heat on the frame to help loosen up the adhesive if you're having any trouble. And there's adhesive holding the charge port in place and the headset in place. Just go slow and you should have no trouble. Be very careful. If you tear the flex cable, there are some available, but who wants to wait for one to come in? Notice here are the little washers down in the bottom of the phone. There are 4 of them. I'm recording this with the tripod right in my face, so forgive me if I go out of focus or get the phone out of the picture. I'll try and describe what's going on if you can't see it. Okay. Now I was going to start moving things over, but you also have to move the frame of the headset jack and charge port. On the white ones it's chrome, on the black ones it's black, but that needs to go into the new frame also. Make sure when you're moving them you keep the same orientation, because you can try and put it in backwards and it won't fit correctly if it goes in backwards. Some of the new frames are quite tight, so you got to get it to go in parallel. It cannot go in at any angle. In this one I had a lot of trouble getting the headset jack to go in straight, so maybe you can see what I did wrong, but I think it's just a real tight fit. And once again, it has to go in completely parallel. If you get it at an angle, you're going to have to force it in. Alright, now this part is a tube that directs the sound from the bottom holes for the microphone up to the actual little microphone. Now if this little tube is not aligned with one of the holes in the bottom of the phone, your other party's not going to be able to hear you as well. Okay, so after I place that in the new frame, I'll try and shine some light through and make sure I see light through that tube, so if you know light goes through, then sound will go through. But the hole in the bottom has to line up with the hole in for the microphone, otherwise nobody will be able to hear you, or they just won't be able to hear you as well. I'm actually getting a razor knife to help peel the microphone frame, the headset, frame away from the housing of the old iPhone. Had a little bit of difficulty getting it out. I ended up pushing it out from the outside using a flathead screwdriver. I just wanted to avoid scratching it at all cost, and I think I did.
million energy.
Yeah, this was not an easy task to get that lined up and then.
Hello. Okay, thank you.
Alright, now once again, for this little chute for the microphone, direct sound from the bottom of the phone to the microphone. Make sure there is a hole so sound will go through it. Getting a flashlight right now. Alright, so right here, see that the light does shine through the chute for the microphone, so there is no obstruction and should get a nice sound. This just aligns the speaker assembly so that the sound comes out the opposite side. There are a mesh, a plastic part, adhesive between it, and adhesive to hold it onto the frame. You want to salvage every bit of adhesive you can so you don't have to rig something. Now I was putting the washers back in, but before that you do need to put the clip on the frame that holds the LCD in, as it is behind the dock port and you can't put it on if you put the dock port on already. So you'll see the clip that I need to put in here. Be careful if you put the washers in not to lose them while you're doing this. Now you want to put the charge port and microphone in first and get those pressed down. The rubber gasket has to go over this little tube, and it's got 3 clips to hold it in place, or 2 clips around the tube. So get that all lined up so that you get good sound. Get your microphone down as close as you can in the frame. You should see no gaps, no light if it's in right. Check all your alignment of your holes. If you can't get it to go perfectly, when you tighten it up, it should align itself, but try and get it there beforehand. Mine wasn't down quite far enough, so before I tightened that down, I held it in place and tightened it. And I do believe that was due to having so much trouble with the little black ring that goes around the frame. I like doing it one section at a time, and you don't have so many parts out of one phone. Testing to make sure that the headset jack goes in nicely and the charge port goes in nicely. Now I'm going to take all the clips that hold the screen in place and move them one by one into the new frame. I'm going to speed this up. The SIM card eject. Now, if you tighten that down and you don't have the SIM card ejector right in the center of the screw, then it'll be real tight to move the ejector. So loosen it up, move the ejector, and tighten it back up. It should flow really freely. Okay, that should be the last of the clips. Now we're taking out the Vibrate motor. There are 3 screws for it. And you set that aside, and then you work on the flex cable for your volume up and down, vibrate switch, and lock button. This also includes the LCD or the LCD or the LED for the flash. This part that's coming out is the Wi-Fi antenna. It's just a flex cable that's mounted to the back glass on the top of the phone, and a cable. This was the one that was hooked to the back of the motherboard. Go very slowly with this. There are components on the cable that you can remove if you bend it too much. Heat up the glass a little with a heat gun if you can. Loosen up the adhesive. Just go slowly, and I'm fast forwarding it. Line that screw hole up. Oh, this is for the volume up and down button, vibrate switch. And on the lock button, there's one screw and a hinge. Now, that's not going to come out. There's a little reflector for the LED.
250 is what we charge.
We charge $250 for it. Yeah, I'm pretty sure the Apple one was $2.99.
Right.
It's just
But we do have bird stock.
no problem.
I think it would be 400.
Now that piece can be a bear to get back in, and I've seen frames that came without a little metal pin that switch hinges on. The easiest thing to do is get a straight pin or a safety pin of the same size, cut it and put it in there, because it's almost impossible to get that pin out of the old frame. Typically, when you take the volume up down button, it does not come off of the cable, as they have double-sided sticky tape with the points to make the depression right on this silver metal part next to the volume up down button. So that cable usually stays adhered to that button. Okay, I guess I'm taking a break, and we'll do the rest shortly, and I will try and combine the videos into one video so we don't have two to watch. Okay, for some reason it did not record me removing this flex cable. However, you just peel slowly. You can use a heat gun to heat up the adhesive so that you don't have to struggle. Pull slowly, carefully, especially around every corner so you don't tear the flex cables. When you get to the corners, make sure you're peeling up to a point where you're not pulling. Okay, one other thing, let's rewind it a little. Okay, the volume up and down button has basically just double-sided tape on these two buttons to this metal part, and there are alignment holes so you know which way to align them up. Just when you're taking them out, notice that this only goes in one way, as one part, as a clip that holds the screen down, and then make sure your alignment holes on here match. Go ahead and put this piece back together so it's on the cable much easier for installation. You will see I struggle a little bit lining that back up after I put the flex cable in. Also, on the vibrate switch part, let's see, the vibrate switch is right here. Okay, when you're putting that down in, make sure that the button is down towards the back of the iPhone. It'll make it easier to align the actual button when you're putting that back in place. You'll see what I mean when we get there. Okay. Alright, on the new buttons, some sets come with these little silver tabs. This one in particular did not, so I am using a razor knife to pry the old tabs out, basically little silver dots, and put them into the new buttons. It was a little difficult on the lock button as it's quite a bit smaller. Make sure you have a sharp razor knife, makes it easier to get under there. Sorry, I was getting off the screen a little here. Doing the same thing with the lock button. We'll go ahead and fast forward as most of it's off the screen on the recording. Oh, there we go. Had a little trouble getting this one off. Tried to put it on the vibrate switch. Sucker's tiny, did not want to go into place. On the vibrate switch, there's a red line, and that should be closest to the screen. So if you're looking at it in this orientation, the red line should be on top of the button for the vibrate switch. Uh, the metal part that the volume up and down button is hooked to, that I told you to adhere to the cable with double-sided tape before you put it in, that part is actually supposed to go in first. However, alignment of the vibrate switch sometimes is difficult. Make sure when you get it in there that it clicks. And I'm thinking right here, I should have did that first. This is the part that the screen clips into, so that goes on upwards. So don't have a lot of room to work. I'm trying to line those 4 holes. And then right here, this goes under the vibrate switch. So should have just took it apart and put the cable on the metal bracket and then put it back in. Would have saved a lot of time. Alright, so we finally got it all lined up. Volume up and down buttons in place. Now go ahead and when you put it in, tighten all your screws up. Don't tighten it down until both are in. Just helps with alignment. And then when they're all started, you can go ahead and tighten it down. Sometimes if you tighten it all the way down, you might not get a nice click on your buttons. If you could just back it off quarter or half turn, and it'll just adjust how much room's in between there, and sometimes you'll get a better click by not having it really tight. So I had to loosen that screw to get the alignment I needed. Now the top button's a little tricky, as this curved part is like a hinge on this pin right here. And if you do get it in right, it's kind of hard to close the hinge. And then a lot of times the flex cable will come off of the metal bracket also. So not the easiest task to do. I still love the design of the iPhone though. So I got the hinge in, the cable came out of place. When you put it back in, it's trying to make sure the alignment holes are in a line. If you need to, put another little small piece of double-sided adhesive in there to hold it in place. Go back and hear that click. It's pretty nice. This little rubber piece, sometimes a pain in the ass when you're putting the camera back in. And also this lens cover, take off before you put the motherboard back in, as it was a little difficult getting in off after everything was in place. For that flex cable, the adhesive was gone, so I went ahead and cut a piece of double-sided tape and put it under it to hold it down to the frame of the phone. Right under here I put double-sided tape. Now we're putting the Vibrate motor back in. Here's the reflector for the flash, and the motherboard's coming. You want to connect this antenna first and make sure it's connected because it's under the board. For some reason you didn't get it connected, you'll need to pop the board back out. Once again, sorry I was off screen. Now just make sure that this flex cable, the connector, is not under the board as it plugs in on top. You got little alignment pins on the logic board, so when you get it in place, make sure it's lined up. I think I was getting tired at the end here, that's why we're off screen so much. But get it in place, try and make sure that the screw holes are centered. It'll make it a lot easier to put the double screws in. In order to start these, you got to be completely at 90-degree angle from the phone. I am using a Phillips head to get them started as opposed to the flathead. This was a little easier. I did tighten these down with the flathead, as you can see there. Now this is the one that wouldn't magnetize to stick to the screwdriver. And be very careful, work in an area where if that screw drops, it's not going to bounce away. Okay. This small part goes over the top upper microphone. Okay. Right in there. You have a Phillips on the bottom and then a double screw on the top. And it's a small one. And that piece holds your upper microphone in place. Now here, I didn't take that blue film off the lens. Would have been easier if I would have did it before I put the board in. There's pretty much nothing that holds the camera in place except for the pressure of the screen going back on. Now that's the flash. And this part holds the flash in. And we're getting close to the end. Okay, this is the two screws that we took out initially that have some flex cables coming off the logic board mounted to the top part of the frame. Are connecting the antenna cables back. These are, I believe, Wi-Fi jumper cables is what they're called. That's the cable connector for the volume, vibrate, lock button, antenna jumpers, the bottom antenna cable, dot connector, time to put the battery back in. Probably would have been wiser to put the middle screw in first. Screen's going back on. this shielding or hold down, cable hold down. There's clips over here that go under to hold this edge in place before we put the 3 screws in. Testing all the buttons out. Sorry, I'm off screen. Checking the Wi-Fi signal. Also check front and back camera. Everything was working great. And that's it.